Okay, this is Georgine Adams, Chair of the Environmental Management Commission, bringing the April 25th, 2023 meeting to order. We have quorum. I will go through who I see is here. And if you raise your hand, so those on the screen can see who you are. From District 2, we have Laura Casio. Thank you. District 3, Del Otsuka. There she is in the back. District 4, John Olson. And they're all in Hilo. District 6, Lee McIntosh. Hi, Lee. And me, Georgine Adams, I'm from District 9. Missing, and I don't know if he'll be showing up. He didn't say he wasn't, is John Burns from District 1 and Melissa Cardwell from District 5. We have 2 seats open for District 7 and 8, but we have with us probably having second thoughts after we finish this meeting is Dot Norris, who will be up before the council next week to presumably get approval to join EMC. So halfway, welcome, Dot, and hope we don't scare you off. So we have the meeting in progress, and the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of our last meeting of March 29. Could I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
John, and a second from
Laura.
Laura. Okay. Were there any corrections, discussions with the minutes? The ones that are in our reference material, I see got some of the typos, transcription crazies that show up every once in a while, but nothing was significant that I caught, at least. Anybody else have any issues with it? If not, let's proceed to vote. Say aye if you accept the approval of the minutes.
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Statement from the chair. Like I said, nobody gets sick. Nobody gets sick anymore. And whether or not you can make our meetings, don't have that as your excuse. Certainly, I've already semi-welcomed Dot Norris to our meeting, and well, we have not a lot of items on our agenda. They all tend to be kind of meaty, so I'm hoping we can have some good discussions, and that our trailing commissioners will show up to be part of that. I forgot to ask Peter, do we have the individual from Reuse Hawaii?
Not yet. I do not see the person on the Zoom yet.
Okay, but he was hoping to be there. So we have two guests today. And I may wind up shifting or asking permission to rearrange the agenda so that we can make sure we hear their comments before they need to disappear. So if you'll bear with me there. Zendo Kern is reputed to be joining us for this meeting, but he'll show up a little bit after 10. So that might be my first shuffle that happens. But first, before I get there, item 4 is our request for any public statements that want to be made. You can either make your statements now up front, or you can wait until we get to an item and then provide your comments. As far as I know, we have no written comments, testimony that was provided to us, correct, Peter?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there anybody in the room or online who would like to provide public testimony?
Yes, Chair, we do have Christine Kubat.
Okay, Kristen. Would you like to speak now or wait until we hit the agenda item?
Hard to hear on the mic.
I actually haven't seen the agenda.
Oh,
So I didn't know if this was just like, Bergman. Yeah, I think so. Budget, yep, number 2, budget for. So we can discuss that 23-24. It's about the budget.
Please speak clearly.
Please
the mic.
speak clearly. Aloha, my name is Christine Kubat. I'm the Executive Director of Recycle Hawaii. I had the opportunity to watch a video recording of the presentation that Director Mansour made to the County Council regarding the budget. And there were some concerns that came up. One is it appears that the director is taking resolution 7323 as some sort of marching orders. When you talk to the different council people, a lot of them were saying, well, it's a resolution, it's just sort of aspirational. But now we learn that sometime within the next 6 months, there's going to be an RFI going out for what basically is going to be a waste to energy solution to our landfill problem. And that's concerning to us because we've been working very hard on a zero waste plan. There's a lot of activity in the private sector and nonprofit arena to develop resource recovery parks. And so there's an opportunity, there's a possibility that the RFI would be written in such a way as to exclude those opportunities. That's concerning. Also, we didn't see any money in the budget that would expand recycling services. And then some kind of mention about the way to deal with recycling is going to be to reorganize the department. I'm not really sure how spending money on an analysis of the department and reorganizing it is going to get us any close to any of our recycling or zero waste goals. So those are of concerns, and I would hope at some point the director would come before the commission and answer some questions and explain to us whether or not this is really happening, if there's this pivot away from zero waste, which is a policy of longstanding policy of the county, and towards waste to energy. And then finally, I think it would be appropriate to have more information about what will go into that RFI and have opportunities for the Environmental Management Commission to provide input. Thank you.
thank you very much, Christine. I will guarantee you that when we get to that item on the agenda, we will be discussing some of the comments that are in the budget proposal and specifically 7323 resolution. So thank you again for your comments. Does anyone else have public testimony to provide today? Seeing none.
No,
Okay, or move on to item 5, which is unfinished business. Since we do not have Zendo Kern to talk about the Planning Commission, I'd like, with your permission, to move to the second item, which is also likely to be brief. The status of the pretreatment draft rule. If Chris or Ramsey want to speak to where that's at.
Let's see, Ramsey's still muted, so I guess tag I'm it. Ramsey has temporarily assigned me chief, which is good, but it also means that I have a lot more on my plate, but I committed to having the draft of the ordinance that includes the pre-treatment program done today. I was not able to do that. So it is still high priority for me to finish today so that I can get to Corporation Council and get them to agree that we need to share it with the commission now so that I can get meaningful input while it's still in the draft phase. And my opinion is this is separate from the public comment period. We need to coalesce around what this thing should look like, what we're covering, what changes we need to make before we get a public comment.
I certainly second that concept. I think it's important for us, especially when you're still at some of the conceptual stage, that's the best time we have for providing advice. And then when it is ready as a final draft, that we would provide comment as appropriate along with the public.
Yes.
So corporate counsel, would you like to comment on why we should not be able to see it?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. There is nothing that is preventing the commission from being able to take a look at it and provide comment. So once we have that, I will be talking with Diana, who is the corporation counsel who handles wastewater, and figure out the steps that we need to take to provide you folks that draft to
Okay.
receive comment.
Great. Thank you. Like I said, I keep putting this on the agenda and I'll keep putting it every time.
Yes.
So I think it's important that the sooner we can have a chance to chew on something, the better our comments and guidance is going to be. Moving.
I'm wondering, have you had access to, this body has done this before? Waste energy, and we've looked at it in the past. So you might try to dig that paperwork out, and it may prove to be informative.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. I have a very noisy office, and when the copy machine is going, it's very difficult to hear. Are you saying that? Go ahead.
Yeah, in the one of the very first iterations of this body after it was created, we did look at waste to energy and the issues that it raised.
Okay,
This is not the topic. What Chris is talking about is pre-treatment of industrial commercial waste going into the sewer.
Okay, well, I was simply referring to, I don't know where in this, if we're talking about waste to energy, we have already at some point been down this road. And I'm just suggesting that they might look around in the files and see what we discovered back then.
If I can defer the discussion of waste to energy, I think we've got a couple opportunities later. I just right now to stick on the sort of sticking on agenda is talking about the pre-treatment wastewater pre-treatment rules for commercial operations.
Chair,
Ramsey, you
Director
have
does
your
have
hand up?
Yeah, I just want to clarify one thing. Thank you, Georgianne, to reply to John. What Chris is talking about is the pre-treatment and the current wastewater code that we've been talking about for a while. To be able to revise the code, the laterals, the connections, sewer trunk main size lines, and the pre-treatment, what have you, if you recall. So our intent is at this time, since EMC is the advisory committee to DEM, I would like for you as the advisory committee to review such document once Sherry or Diane Mellon Lacey gives us the green light, but it definitely not a public, it's not a public document now, because I just wanted to make sure it's done through your advisory committee so you could review it and see if we have missed anything or anything you guys would like to advise us on or add or modify. So that's the intent for it. And I think rightfully so, you guys are an advisory committee and will be very important to have your comments on the draft before it goes to the public. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to recognize John Burns from District 1 has joined us. Thank you, John. Wave. So, there he is. Okay. Moving to item 3 on the unfinished business is the draft letter to DEM following the recommendations from Kara Wong as Deputy Corporate Counsel to first go to DEM and ask them to see whether the state, who really is the one that can manage a point of sale or advanced disposal fee that the county apparently cannot do on its own. It needs to go through the state. So I drafted that letter. It's in the package. And we need to get approval from the commission to send that letter. Everybody have a chance to look at it. It basically says what Kara had written up. If the state solid waste division of DOH has done a study, give it to us. And if they haven't, do one. That's basically what it says.
Yes.
Could I get a motion to adopt it? Or I guess the question first, do we want to also copy council on this letter?
Chair, the version that I have ready to go to council does have Hawaii County Council copied, so.
Oh, okay,
I have
good.
9
Maybe,
copies here, so.
It's covered.
okay,
good.
good. So again, would anybody like to give me a motion to
So moved.
second?
Sorry, what is the motion?
The motion is to send that letter.
Okay.
I'll sign it and send it. If I get a second, then we get a vote. So
You have a second.
was Lee making a second?
I'll make a
Is there any
second.
discussion on the content? Do I need to make revisions? Okay,
Yeah.
all in favor of sending that memo?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. It goes. I will send you a signed version, Peter, for you to mail off. The next item, and we've got some time to talk about it. Number 4 is my write-ups. I did a little bit of breakdown on the option of many options I listed at both our February and March meetings of how do we do more diversion from landfill. One of the things I didn't put in there as one of my top options is waste to energy or going to H-Power, and I probably should have included them just as an option, but they aren't high on my list as the way to deal with waste. But the one I chose to write up specifically was if we were to ban additional waste from landfill, period, as a way to stop filling up our landfill, how would we go about doing that? And hopefully you had a chance to at least skim over what I put together. The concept I had was that we'd have a set of criteria that you'd work through to decide, are there some designated recyclable waste that legitimately easily could be diverted and safely managed outside of landfill. So if you scan down, Peter, I see you've got that. We do ban certain things from landfill, mostly because they're hazardous to go to a landfill. We don't have a hazardous waste landfill on the island. But if we were to ban additional waste, stop scrolling, go back up to the number 1 there. Thank you. you have to have places to collect it. If somebody can't throw it in their trash or take it to the transfer station and put it down the chute, you've got to give them a reasonable place to put it. So we need to have enough collection locations available to the majority of residents. We're not going to have transfer collection stations everywhere on this island. So it's not an easy criteria to meet, but it would be a significant one to look at, is if there's a way to actually collect without a whole lot of pain the item. So that'd be one criterion that you would score against any additional waste you wanted to ban from landfill. Second one would be the reasonable fees, whether we can accomplish this upfront advanced disposal fee that John also is trying to deal with, or at purchase point like we do with tires and batteries, car batteries, that is. Can we make it not so costly that people are just going to dump it in a ditch someplace? Third criterion would be that you can actually reuse it or recycle it. It's economically feasible. There's a market out there. There are places, preferably here instead of on the other side of the ocean. But there needs to be a viable economic return to support an ongoing recycling or reuse operation. Next would be that the life cycle impacts. We just got that life cycle study, which I hope we'll talk about when that comes up in the DEM section, that the life cycle costs make sense to do the reuse recycle as opposed to sending it to a landfill. Are there education programs? Are people going to understand what they can and cannot recycle? Primarily, this is to make sure that that recycle stream that is being diverted is clean enough that feeds back into. It's not going to cost a fortune to clean it up in order to reuse it or recycle it. And people know they can do that. And then the last criterion that I came up with was that it's worth the bother. It's going to reduce some significant volume from going to landfill. It's not going to be a joke. So those were my brainstormy 6 criteria. You could develop an algorithm where you weight one higher than the other, or you give more points or less points, and come up with a score. And while I didn't actually come up with a score, I ran a couple of examples just to show you what I was talking about. We have a program for high five. It does pretty good. People more or less know, except for the tourists. The tourists are a big issue here as far as how do we get education so that we get things done properly. So we've got a place, lots of places we collect it. The fees are pain in the butt, but they're doable. People have even talked, we could bump up the fees. The advanced disposal, like I said, we're going to see what we could work out with the state. But there is a system in place. It's well known. The life cycle showed it was a good thing to recycle high five, although it didn't explicitly look at the high five, because the assumption, I think, upfront with that LCA was that it's a viable program and they didn't need to spend time looking at it. And that the volume issue, the last criterion, I'm not so sure it represents a lot going into the landfill. It's okay, but the rest of them score pretty high, I think. We could increase it if we sucked in the wine and liquor bottles as well. So high five is one of those top candidates I would propose for a landfill ban. Just say, no, you can't throw it in the trash. Make yourself turn to another container and recycle those guys. Green waste, landscape, again, it's an existing program we have. How can we make it better? Many, but not all transfer stations can take green waste. We've got the Hilo location, which is pretty major, and commercial operations can also use the sanitary landfill on the west side. Fees, and you save for the commercial side, it costs half as much to bring green waste. Residential's free, so fees are pretty reasonable. The recycling cost goes back to that HER contract. We're paying way too much to have them just turn it into mulch instead of compost. So that one's going to get a lower score. Life cycle is favorable as long as you're keeping the pests and the fire hazards down. And it's pretty well known around the island, I think, that we can indeed recycle the green waste. So again, the idea would be we would ban it. We'd say, no, you cannot put green plants, not food. Food's a whole nother issue, in your trash. And will people do it? Will they follow it? Enforcement, I think Lee had raised that last time, is an issue. And a lot of that is education. And how do we keep informing people, don't do that, etc. It's a significant volume, that last thing on the screen, 7%, and you can argue all over the place on how much actually is green waste that could have been, should have been recycled that wasn't. So we would see a big difference in the amount of waste going into our landfills. Obviously, if we could add other organics, whether it's food or paper, that would really ramp up the volumes, because those probably represent the largest percentage of should not be in a landfill waste that we have on island. Scroll up some more, and I'm forgetting what's on the next page. Corrugated cardboard, again, we have systems to collection sites at each of the transfer stations. You can take it to Atlas and Business Services. The big box stores already do it themselves. So that gets a high score. Again, the fees are favorable if you're taking it to landfill. You shouldn't be, but it's really, it should be less costly. There's a market for it. It's actually worth money to send it. Life cycle, again, that report came back saying that from an environmental impact standpoint, it's certainly worthwhile to recycle the corrugated cardboard. Education, I see a lot of crap going into those corrugated bins at the transfer station, or at least in Waimea, which is the one I use. So I think we've got to do a better job on education. And again, it's a fairly significant amount of stuff. If you could add other paper and do a paper recycling collection and recycling, it would be even better. So again, corrugated cardboard, I think, is a good one that we could say, no, you don't throw that in the trash. Other cardboard, we'd need to work a little bit more on. Glass, again, the non-high five glass is pretty favorable overall. It's not insignificant amount. So it's, if you see my logic as I was trying to work through that, this one has the advantage that we're actually using it on island, maybe not in the best way, but we are using it on island. So we don't even have the environmental costs of shipping it off island. Just keep scrolling down. The next I came up with some examples of things that, they're not quite ready yet. Electronics, once a month rather, maybe on west side, you can take it to Mr. K's, but that's where you can take it. And it's not all electronics, it's a fairly narrow set of categories of things that are taken through that EPR program. Presumably the fees are going to be covered. Shipping that stuff, the amount of materials, the market's kind of iffy. A life cycle, I don't know. Education, again, it's not good right now, but and it's also not a very high volume of what's filling up the landfill. Plastics, other than the high five, again, we have limited collection right now. There are no fees, but maybe we could expand the high five program and look at EPR. Scroll some more, Peter. Not all the way. Anyway, recycling of these, again, the market is up and down, and oftentimes down. That may be changing. From a life cycle standpoint, if you look through that study, landfilling is not a big deal of plastics, but it's a better deal to recycle it. Education, I already complained about that. I don't know how much it is in the landfill. It's been argued that it's gone up since last studies, but I don't really know for our island. So, but if you see the concept, if you have questions, I'm going to quit talking. Is it, or I should say, my basic question to you as EMC is this worth exploring further and working out in more detail? Because there's a heck of a lot of details involved.
Dean, I would love to comment.
Please.
I think this is it's a beautiful pulling together of all of this information. I think so. Just looking through it, I would also really like to look at and add construction waste and perhaps ordinances that we could suggest in our county to do deconstruction on instead of demolition. And the difference, and of course, education and training around that is going to be, necessary and purposeful when it comes to that. But being that construction materials is such a large component, and this would be it would be an opportunity then to take that into consideration and set up a larger scales of repurposing of that material. Of course, it's a huge endeavor, so it's not simple.
Definitely.
It's almost a category in itself, it seems like, but it's very important. And I think
is, and hopefully we'll have somebody from Reuse Hawaii show up at the meeting and who could talk about doing just that and what some of the hurdles are that they face. I wanted to punt on that one. It's on the top of my list of, if you want to get volume down in our landfills, it's got to be construction, demolition, favorably known as C&D waste, because it shouldn't be, a lot of it should not be waste. So yeah, good to hear. You agree. I agree. Anybody else? Or other comments you had, Laura?
I just also I know I would like to learn more and research more about food waste diversion too, and I know that also comes with its whole set of Department of Health pieces, but looking at what the barriers are and what the what that would look like. And I think a big component to this is really setting up infrastructure for reuse and refill. As you're talking, so in a larger scale for our consumptive habits. And so again, it goes back to a much larger shift, but it's really important in terms of that zero waste approach. And when you were talking about the compost, I'm curious if we know what it would take to convert the compost, the mulch to compost, and is that much bigger undertaking as well. Not that that necessarily is as high priority at the moment, but just was curious as we're going through it. And then the last thing was, in terms of the corrugated cardboard, am I clear that, am I correct in knowing that that is shipped off island? Or is that something that gets incorporated into, could we, moving forward, could we look at what it would take to perhaps shred locally and mix that into our compost, as you mentioned, the paper, also, perhaps the paper additive, et cetera, and also the difference between accepting corrugated and non-corrugated. So the question on that would be, could we additionally shred the non-corrugated and add that, or what are the limitations to that? So those are some of my questions for my own research. And yeah, and also thinking about the deconstruction of telescopes that are going to be happening. There's at least one decommissioning in process already, and I believe that there's one more right behind it. And so as far as scrap metal, I think that is something that we might need to prioritize. What are we doing with that scrap metal? That's all I had for the larger, for the whole at this moment. Thanks.
Oh, great questions, comments, things to look into. I was trying not to write a book with ideas, so more conceptual. Yeah, there are humongous issues involved with all. I can offer, and maybe offline, some comments on your questions and thoughts. Others, Lee, you had some thoughts about it?
Yeah, I was just thinking, would we really need to look at look into the details of all this? Wouldn't we just sort of send a resolution to the director and ask them if they could look at expanding the list they currently have to items that we can already cover, and then the department would look at if that's a feasible job or not, because we don't know everything involved, and because we're more suggestive rather than instructive, so, or authoritative. So I just thought we shouldn't get bogged down in details, just look at broad strokes and suggestions that we could make.
Well, I guess we can ask Ramsey about that. I'm sure they would like us to do more of their homework for them. I've shared these ideas, I mean, before with Cinnaberg and part of SWAC with George Hadisco. I haven't, I actually did sit down and talk a little bit with the former solid waste chief, Mike Rivera, and I haven't hit up Craig yet to beat him over the head with all these ideas, but yeah, we could do it as more a resolution if you want. This is what we'd like to see, the direction or some specific response, or we could create a new PIG, permitted interest group. Is that what the thing stands for? Of people who'd like to work on the issues on the side. It's what the commission would like to do, and that's my question. What do you want to do, commission? Other commissioners have thoughts?
I mean, I can weigh in on the, within the metes and bounds of the areas that I inhabit. I try to keep track of things like the construction remains, what the builders are doing with it. Cardboard is interesting in that it does seem to be disappearing on its own at a pretty high scale, at least in my end of the world. Just looking at the 3 transfer stations that are high use in Puna, the overall reuse items that end up in the bins seems to be going down.
So you think it's a program that's working pretty well right now?
Yeah, I think.
I don't know how much isn't going into the landfill. I also know they have to be rejecting some of those bins because they've got so much other garbage in it.
Well, yeah, I'm not, again, it's my little world out there, Puna side.
Yeah.
And, the reuse component in Puna, as our planning director will, I'm sure be happy to tell you, is quite high. There are people there who, if it is reusable, it grows legs and wanders away. So that's a,
Oh, good to hear. Good to hear.
how we make east meet west. You know, further lower that bar, might be something we could look into too.
Lee, did you have another comment to make?
No, I was just trying to fix my light.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Georgine, can I add a little bit too? I just, as far as EPA funding, it seems like DEM would be perfectly positioned to be tracking EPA funds regarding much of what you have compiled in this, and you know, have those opportunities, the grant funding opportunities be, you know, setting up infrastructure to implement, you know, and further many of these ideas. So I'm wondering on the, you know, from the DEM side, if they are actively pursuing and engaged in those conversations with the EPA.
Maybe we can wait for Ramsey to, when he's talking about the budget, that was part of, I think, in the presentation that he did to council, and their issue is always a never ending. They don't have people to put together the upfront work that needs to be done to get those grants and then to manage those programs once they're in place. But yeah, I'd love it. Other thoughts from commissioners? John Burns?
I mean, it's all the discussions sound reasonable to me.
Well, I guess it's a issue of energy. We could take the route that Lee has offered and write up some general conceptual. I could include this. Part of the reason I do these things in these meetings is I know Ramsey's sitting there listening, as is Craig. So we are communicating to them, but if we want to formalize it, we could put together, this is the direction we think you should go. These are some of the priorities and the focus areas that EMC sees as being valuable for the county. Again, my focus on this was what could the county do at our level without having to go to the state, that we could start making some significant changes here on the island for diversion because our landfill is filling up. Or we can put some more homework into it. And maybe that's where Ramsey, you need to come back at us. If all we did was say, here, this is the direction we think you should go. Is that enough, or do you need more? Need is the word, not want, but need.
You know, I mean, it's tricky. Like it's really complex, honestly, I think. And then one thing I think that can be constructive is, you know, having some back and forth feedback, if this makes sense. So, you know, we've had turnover in waste management, but when I spoke with folks before, Greg and a few others, you know, it can, if you're trying to think about the best way to use everyone's time efficiently, right? It's like we could make a lot of, you know, recommendations or ways we see things to happen. In my experience, like working behind the scenes in a state government, there are often a lot of complicated and nuanced reasons that have many, many layers of bureaucracy as to why it's never as simple as just, okay, let's attack that problem and fix this. And so I do think it's really valuable sometimes to get almost an initial set of input on their end in terms of what are tangible decisions that are on the radar within the fiscal year to the next few fiscal years where the input can be most valuable. And I hope that this makes sense. I'm not trying to sound negative or anything, but you could make, for instance, certain recommendations, but they just might be wildly outside the scope of what's possible to be done that year. So then you have to ask, okay, if we're trying to make improvements, was it an efficient use of time to put forth these recommendations that aren't able to be, say, directly addressed right now? Versus if you have a back and forth where we look at it as, how can we help you with these upcoming decisions that, whether or not we like it, might be constrained, to these several options. At least then the input we're giving is a lot more directly related to decisions and problem solving that is occurring based on what just has to be done. So, I mean, it's kind of, I guess, a suggestion to do the best to work within the system so that our feedback is as valuable as possible. Does that make sense? Sort of what I'm saying in terms of,
It makes perfect sense to me.
Okay. So yeah, it was, so when we went, this is going back to, I think it was over a year ago now, maybe 2 years, when we each had small niche endeavors, and I went and met with them a few times, and it was like really enlightening to just see what they were already working on that I wasn't aware of, what other folks weren't aware of, and it was helpful to realize, oh, okay, like these are things that they could really use support, and they're making progress in those directions. And so it could be good. It's just, it is tricky because we also have, elections and all these turnovers that occur each few years. So it's not something I want to trivialize and say it's easy. But yeah, I think that the constructive back and forth can be a lot more fruitful sometimes than just recommendations themselves.
Any comments from Ramsey or Craig?
Sure. I think you guys, great discussion. Definitely, John, thank you for your comment, Georgia, and thank you for your presentation. It is a complex thing. And Laura, great comments in addition as well. I just noted some of your great additions to the comment and the presentation. It is, just to let you know, we are, I think we secured a consultant. Gene is not here, or Mike Kaha, to talk about it, but we have $500,000 currently in this current year budget. Our intent to look at the current operation, evaluate it, analyze it, and then that's from transfer station to having one landfill to transporting waste east to west. So we need to analyze it, understand it. And then the consultant will also, in addition to that, they're gonna look at recommendation. What is the best route, more efficient route, cost-saving route, environmentally protected route that the county should take, and you as a commission members will be involved in the process. And I think, Georgianne, you hit right on it when you looked at the LCA study, and definitely it's no surprise to nobody, right? We knew recycling is the best way to go about doing things rather than taking it to the landfill. C&D, inert material, need to come out of the landfill. I mean, we need to figure a way, and we need to define the outlets. The big challenge we see is get the outlets here locally to start investing into these products and putting them back on the market. So the scope of service that we asked the consultant, we have not, like I said, they just barely finished the selection process, is to perform more comprehensive operational, including landfill practices, capacity, lifespan, vertical, horizontal, or deeper excavation, if there's any possibilities, the recycling, diversion, waste to energy resource recovery, staffing level needs, the logistics. John hit on it, in a government system, the logistics of getting from A to Z is totally different than in the private sector. So we need to analyze that. We need to look at regulatory constraint, policies and procedures, rules, financial. That may include forecasting for future funding, revenue generation, analysis. How could we improve our revenues? And that's the stuff that you all hit on. Is it pay as you throw, or is it, maybe partnering with somebody else's that could generate revenue, but give us and expand our current lifespan on the landfill? Because every ton that comes in, it takes space within this expensive cells we have. So some of these, and also look at the culture and any other vital analysis that our current operation faces. We've been talking about it since I started. I remember it 2 years ago. How are we going to get there? Finally, we had the money secured this current year. It took us a while to get that funding secured. So we're going to put it to use, and you're all going to be part of the process, because eventually this is what's going to be hopefully going for the administration and county council for either adoption on a new policies and procedure or change of current operation to more different operation. They're going to be looking at the possibility of curbside collection. How could we so they all interconnect, diversion, resource control, all of that connects. So it's very complicated, but our intent, my intent from day one, is to get a better grab on the situation and look at the venues and the outlets that we have currently here and how we could utilize them to be able to produce here locally and divert and redirect things from the landfill. So this
Well,
is
I would certainly
what we
love
have.
to
Go
have
ahead.
you bring the consultant, once he's on board, to come and talk to EMC.
Yes,
And-
our intention is right now we like I said, staff, they just went through the short listing, and yes, that's the intent, is you all stakeholder within this process. County council members are stakeholders. The mayor office is a stakeholder. So the intent with this consultant, he's going to interview all of participants that have an impact on creating policies and procedures. The public, we're going to reach out to the public through this monkey survey process and figure out what the public would like to see. And all that data is going to come in and is going to generate this recommendation at the end of the day. So definitely we want to make sure we get on the right track from day one, because I don't want to start something with a consultant and finding out later we missed some type of analysis and what have you. But we limited on budget, but we have currently money this year and we added extra money next year. So that hopefully should get us there and should address Laura's concern, John's, and you, Georgianne, with what you presented. What you presented is a great presentation. I think we need to share it with the consultant. You've done a lot of work in doing it. So I think great work. Hopefully that will give you guys an idea of, the direction and how we would like to continue having you participate in the process as well.
Well, and I should, be upfront about part of my ulterior motive here is I want to look at diversion opportunities other than hauling it all to some biochar bucket. that I don't think is the right way to approach it. So it is somewhat to counter the whole idea of the resolution as it was made, that our focus should be on diversion and utilization of resources and not biochar.
Well, that's, yeah, Georgie, and that's two different topics. You mix in and blend in. From an
It's
operation
an
analysis.
ecosystem. Everything is connected.
Right,
Everything
right,
is-
but resolution 7323 is, you know, specific, the one is by 2026 and what have you, it's non-binding. I just want to make sure Christine understand, I heard her comment. It's a non-binding resolution, but as R&D and our department always looking for ways to get to zero waste and ways to be able to capture the new energy, green energy that everybody claims it's out there, right? So our intent is to continue working with R&D and put an RFI out to see who's out there, what type of technologies. You know, it's non-binding, it's RFI. The idea is we always have to do our due diligence to pursue any technology that exists. It doesn't mean that we're going to marry that technology or going to implement it, but it's for us to do our due diligence. We have to chase that technology. There's so much funding out there for that as well, under climate change, under green energy. So if anything bends out and it comes, you guys gonna be part of the process. If it works out for the county and it make dollar sense and environmental protection sense, and you know, that may be a route that could also be considered. So, you know, we're taking two different routes, but yeah, go ahead.
Laura,
Chair, I have a question for Director Ramsey. I'm sorry, thank you for bringing up some of these points. I'm curious, I have a couple questions. One is about how current long-term contracts might be affected by this analysis. And then in talking about the two seemingly different pieces, the analysis and then the RFI, would the analysis, you know, the result from an analysis and hiring a consultant for this impact, you know, the potential directions that a future RFI around this, you know, whatever comes up from the analysis? It seems like they're actually one and the same, or is there different funding for the RFI, or is that something that needs funding? As it's just very confusing because we're having an analysis that we're putting money towards, and then it would seem like some of the input that would come back from the analysis would help to guide what an RFI would even look like.
Yeah, two different things. RFI, you don't need a fund. It's RFI. You just put a document out there to kind of, you throw the bait in the ocean and see what comes out of it. And if there is response, or anybody out there that willing to join venture, and you know, it's the outlets I was talking about earlier. Is there's any outlets out there that willing to deliver on you know, diversion, into green energy, into climate change, and whatever you want to call it. So, and that doesn't, you know, put in the RFI, it's our staff just put in the RFI out, working with R&D. The other one, it's more of policy and procedures driven, eventually, that current operational analysis, because something that we have to deal with and something that we need to rewrite our policies and procedures based on, because we cannot wait for you know, somebody to come in and build a manufacturer, and it may take 10 years to even get to that point. But in the meantime, we need to deal with our daily operation.
No,
If
that
you
was a
recall-
significant recommendation from the Solid Waste Advisory Commission committee, and the Integrated Solid Waste Management Plan was a need for operational evaluation and study. So I am thrilled that that's going to happen. It's the reality check.
Not only that, if you remember when we have that eruption down Saddle Road, and the discussion was we may end up closing that road. And the first thing, the phone was ringing. Ramsey, what are you going to do with the waste from the east side to the west side? How are we going to be? So there's a lot of challenges we need to revisit, and that's what the operational analysis will address. Are we, in case of emergencies, our current operation and what have you. So yeah, two different things, Laura.
But just in terms of the RFI, though, you mentioned the analogy of throwing bait, but depends on what kind of bait you throw, you're going to get a different kind of fish. And so I guess that's where I go back to the asking the question about the analysis, because the result from that consultation would seem to help dictate what kind of bait gets thrown based on the information gathered. And if we're spending those funds to do that kind of research, it would seem like those would inform that next level of RFI. And
That's
I guess then going back to the first question, which was and then also adding in how would the analysis impact current long-term contracts that we have at this moment?
Yeah, that's what I was going to come back to. Your current contracts mandates us to stay on track with the same thing that we've been doing. I mean, we have two long-term contracts that we cannot get out of, because contractual obligation. So we have to continue the current operation we have no matter what, because of just the current contractual agreement. So the RFI, definitely it's out there just to see what we could do outside these two contracts or within the limitation of these contracts, if possible. But the operation analysis is going to address the current contractual obligations we have. And unfortunately, we have it for a very, very long time. So
I'm going to take chair prerogative because I need to make sure we get finally input from Zendo Kern, who's available now. So I'd like to say good topics, good issues. I'm willing to see how this consultant works out and what kind of conversations we can have on that. Perhaps you can share with us the scope of work that you're going to have them looking at. And part of my reason for throwing out the concept of diversion possibilities and banning it from landfill was just get you thinking. There isn't a magic bullet, an easy solution to it, but I'm willing to see what this consultant is going to be able to come up with. I would like to go back and I also some way I'm trying to really challenge that we are stuck with those two contracts. And I'm going to keep behind the scenes trying to push on that, Laura, and the rest of you guys, because at some point, I think we need to come as a commission and say, no, sometimes contracts are worth walking away from because they're so bad. But we'll see. I'm still working that angle. But I do need to go back and try and get a presentation done And I've got some follow-up questions that are related because it's all, like I said, it's all an ecosystem. Everything's related to everything else. So the issue of zoning and building codes and how we can use that to address some of the construction and demolition issues that we're facing, and the ability to collect recyclables and reusables, I think sits in Zendo Kern's lap as well. So if you can find him, Peter, or is he there?
He's here. He's
Okay.
here.
One more thing before you get on to Zendo here.
Okay.
It's his dog now. And that's the 80,000 plus buildable lots in Puna. The gorilla in your backyard. And not a single one of the transfer stations are located in any way, shape, or form are going to be usable going forward. That's the reality of that.
Well, presumably that is going to be a good chunk of this consultant's operational study, is that the lack of preparation for the coming
No
future.
bets behind
tsunami.
that. Yeah. So, just so you FYI, we tried before. We had 2 really superior grant writers get us the grant for the KL, what turned out to be the KL transfer station. It is in a totally inappropriate place. It has only killed 14 people since it came online. You're turning in and out of traffic that's moving at the slowest pace.
John, I appreciate your passion and concern about this. And I want you to take time and sit down with whatever consultant they wind up hiring, and you tell them about the operational idiocy of KL.
I don't have
so that
to.
they can incorporate it in their report.
Go ahead.
Thank you, John. Zendo Kern, are you ready? You're used to these kind of groups, right? We understand that you guys are doing some major planning and prepping for the next countywide zoning code and everything else that's going on. And our concern is going to be, how are you going to be able to help us with some of the problems we're trying to solve? And how can we help you? So take it away. And thank you very much for being able to appear finally for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, members of the commission. It is great to be here. I apologize for our scheduling conflicts. It wasn't one thing, it was another. I got sick the last time. So good to be here, and I apologize. So what I'll do is I'm going to just kind of do a quick overview of what we've initiated, what we've done to date, and then what we're looking at moving forward. And there's still a tremendous amount of work to do. We have a lot of work to be done. So last year, we got funding for a code update. So our codes that we're looking at are chapter 23 and chapter 25. 23 is the subdivision code. Chapter 25 is the zoning code. Chapter 23 is based in 1983. Chapter 25 is 1996. There's been, small amendments made throughout the years, but there hasn't been really any substantial, like, let's really look at the code. So we got the funding. We then contracted with 2 consultants, REA, for the long version is Rundell, Eisenberger Associates, and Orion Planning. They're both firm. We did the professional services process where we sent out the information of what we're looking for. We had a bunch of people come through, and then we had a panel. The panel reviewed all of the consultants, made the recommendation to me as a director, and I approved that recommendation that was made by the panel that was made up of various folks on the team. And so it came out to be REA and Orion. They had a lot of code experience, because you have different consultants that do different specialties, right? Some consultants are good at putting EAs together. Some consultants are good at putting rezonings together, and code is very unique. So REA and Orion was also brought in by Maui to do their code work. So they already had a familiarity within the state. So we got together with them, And we also brought in SSFM to help with some community outreach, because there are more boots on the ground and helping facilitate some of our community meetings. So the first step was really collect data. Let's get information. We know what we know as a department. There's been a fix-it list going on in the department for many years. And so we curated a bunch of a number of public outreach meetings, some open house meetings, east side, west side, north, south. We also did a bunch of focus groups that the consultants did, where we brought in folks ranging from professionals in the industry, the folks more engaged in the environmental side of it and the cultural side of it, and in between, to really try to get a lot of input from the focus groups and community. There's also a website that was put up, cohcodeupdate.com, which is another opportunity to collect data. So basically, most of all of last year was collecting information from the focus groups, from the public outreach meetings, etc. And now we've got that information more or less, and now we're going through the information as a department and as a team. And it's one thing for the consultants to help coordinate, facilitate, and then it's another thing for us to go through it and really look at it and sift through that information. How does this actually work, boots on the ground, or what are we really seeing? And that's very critical. I think just having a consultant running the process on their own doesn't really work, because even though they're good at code, there can be a disconnect from what's White County, what's Big Island, what's the nuances between, east side, west side, north, south. And so it's really critical for our team, with the planning department, to go through it and really steer that. So we saw that. So we've been trying to set a cadence and a timing on how we're going to do that. And we are short-staffed, as most every other department is. So trying to fit that in amongst our normal everyday duties. And that's what we're working on right now. We've collected the information, collected data. We're still receiving information. And now we're sorting through that. We're looking at some adjustments to the framework of the code, but not a lot. I want to keep a lot of similarities. It's kind of this balance of keeping similar aspects, a similar flow, because there's a familiarity with it, and making the proper adjustments so it's not completely new, which leads to a lot of uncertainty, a lot of concern. And that was feedback that we were hearing as we were going through funding, was how much are you going to change it? And there was no directive on how much it's going to be changed, as much as it needs to be changed. But format wise, again, we want to keep some continuity in there. High level thoughts are making it just easier to understand, making it more explicit in certain areas, linking different sections of other codes. Like, oftentimes there'll be a section within the code that relates to HRS. We should be able to have that linkage of HRS, so somebody can be like, oh, HRS 2.5, 4.5, oh, what, click, and there it is, versus having to go down some other rabbit hole to get there. So it's trying to make it more user friendly, more straightforward, and that's the concept around it. And so what we're doing is collecting that and now trying to give the consultants the feedback on how we're going to be doing those particular updates. One of the themes that we heard as we're going around was the concern around the general plan. The general plan's been an update for now 6 years. Started right at the end of Kanoi administration. It carried through Mayor Kim's administration, and then we took it on now. And so we've been working very diligently on the general plan. And so one of the themes is how does the general plan correlate and relate to the code? Well, it correlates and relates a lot, because a lot of the policies and directives in the general plan are to drive code. And so it's critical that the general plan is done first and then fed back into the code. Looking at everything that I see, there's a lot of work that we're still doing in the code that's evergreen and at least up for discussion. So we're not having any deficiencies in the work effort that we're doing. So while the general plan is moving through, the code work's being done on the backside. And when the general plan gets done and approved, we will then look at any adjustments that were made to the general plan, bring those back into the code, update any last adjustments to the code, and then bring the code back up for we'll go through public public hearings, public outreach, collect additional feedback on what the draft is. And then once that draft is really worked out, that'll go through the commissions and then ultimately the council for approval process. So realistically, we're not gonna see the code until after the general plan. And based on the timing of the general plan, we're hoping that code's coming out sometime late 24. That's realistic on what it is. Now, knowing how long everything takes a long time. I like to get things done, so I really wanted to initiate this process, get the funding, get the momentum going, and utilize the time whenever we have a gap in the workload to focus on that. So we're gonna have a lot of work product there ready to basically press, launch when the general plan is done. That being said, there are some lower hanging fruit areas that we're looking at that are not necessarily contingent on the general plan that we'd be bringing forward. Like, for example, we're working with Heather right now on transient accommodation rental update. That's an update, looking at some potential updates to the Ohana code or ADUs that we know we can look at right now. So that's the strategy that we have moving forward. And really, I guess I think it'd be helpful to get into a dialogue and answer questions and hear comments and hear feedback, etc. But that's the general overview, and happy to get into a dialogue.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure what you're gonna find is we don't really understand exactly where all the lines are drawn and what's your responsibility versus other parts of
Don't
activity.
process building permits.
On the general plan, are you still taking comment or is that?
Not at the moment. I mean, anybody can submit information and we'll take it for sure. What we have is we've received a tremendous amount of comments, thousands of comments and feedback. We have this massive database of comments and information that we've been then going through the general plan and incorporating those comments, feedback, elements of the CDP, et cetera, and all that work that was done into it now. So we're not in the collection phase, but again, if somebody has a brilliant idea, throw it out there. We'll take it and look at it. What I've noticed is, in my experience going through the general plan and any plan, complicated is easy. Simple and concise is hard. And that's my goal, is simple and concise and straightforward and understandable and actionable. And so that's what we've been really working on, is just refining that. And so the general plan, the draft, we're hoping to release sometime this summer. And then that'll be the next opportunity to collect feedback, and then you guys can look at it, review it, and then offer us feedback in that, and any adjustments can be made. Maybe before it gets to planning commission, or during the process. There's going to be a multiple, public hearings. We'll go out for public input, and then there will be Windward Planning Commission, Leeward Planning Commission, and then the committee, and then the county council.
Okay. Well, I mean, one semi-minor issue is it keeps referring to the previous integrated solid waste management plan done in 2009, and there is a 2019 version out that probably ought to be referred to, but I'll get that comment in specifically at some point.
And I'm not looking at my phone to look at my phone. I'm taking a note.
Okay. One of the things I know, that kind of planning codes is not my thing, but one of the things we've heard is that there is a challenge to getting recycle collection areas located in a subdivision. Is that true? And how is it possible to overcome that? It may even be a state regulation that's in the way of the recycle collection operations being treated like a transfer station or a solid waste facility, which no, obviously you don't want to have a solid waste facility right in the middle of a development, but you do want to be able to collect things that are recyclable and that could be transferred off to pick a place. Is that kind of planning something that is within the purview of?
That would be the purview of the code. I definitely think the general plans would be a bit higher level, where we're solving for our waste, trying to get to zero waste, et cetera. So I do think there's opportunity for that discussion within the code. I think it'd be good to understand what that looks like exactly. Is it a 20 by 20 area with some bends that people go through? Is it a larger area? Kind of like, what's the large size? So what's the small size? To try to then, where do we embed that into, say into the code or into the subdivisions? Right now, if it's commercial, we require, loading area, solid waste management plan. Subdivisions don't get that type of scrutiny right now. It's basically, your roads, your right of way, your, water, wastewater, and your lot sizes. It's not really looking at, recycle areas. I think a lot of that generally comes from more of a mainland type of thought process where you get curbside pickup. So it's less of a thought, but I do think it's a very viable thought. How do we look at it, and then whose Kuleana would it be, right? Because it's one thing to have the space, and that's another thing to actually have operations that come and collect it. Is it up to the landowners to do so? Is it up to the association to do so? Or is it a county program that would come through and pick it up, and we then need just a central gathering place for all of that? So I think that would be really helpful, and this was a great conversation to begin to integrate into the update.
And who do we do that with, or how do we? Get
You
that?
can go, so you can email April Supernot, program manager, or you can go to codeupdate.com. Peter, maybe if you can email them April's information, april.supernot at hawaiicounty.gov, and then codeupdate.com is a way that we can collect that information.
Okay, I appreciate that.
And then again, even when it comes out as a draft, we'll have another opportunity to look at it again and say, okay, now here's what we're really looking at, and what can maybe we add more into there, or what other nuances that we maybe miss, or what's modern now, right? Because things are changing.
Well, and it's also the complication, and you're sitting right next to John Olson, so he can bend your ear about that. But the idea of maybe there is no real home association to cover the costs. Is there a way to push and say, if you've got a development, a subdivision, you need to provide these services, and they include having a place to consolidate.
That's a settled issue, that it's up to government to provide. In other words, this comes under health and safety. They have to deal with the trash. They have to deal with the wastewater. And it goes right through the state, down to the county, down to, the public health officials at this end. That is the problem. We have subdivision, we have an entire numbers of tens of thousands of acres that basically are beyond the control. They were never meant to be occupied.
Just have that conversation.
Yeah, he's heard this before, since he was about that tall.
And I heard it from Helene Hale too.
Yeah. She was there. She did it.
Mhm.
And she was forever regretful.
And so part of that conversation is we have these large subdivisions that are there, for better or worse, they're there. And what we're looking, that's basically massive suburban type planning, right? And so through the CDP processes, we looked at having little urban centers in there, urban growth boundaries within these areas to provide basic services. We have an HPP, Orchid land, et cetera. And while they've been there in the CDP, there really hasn't been the action taken or the desire from, say, landowners to really do something. I do think that would be a critical component to helping with it,
Well,
because
I don't, you're not gonna get any help there because they don't have to.
oh, I know. So that's what I'm trying to figure, like, how do we get, move, like,
Well,
you know, carrots and
I mean,
sticks?
you're gonna have to bite the bullet and say, this is what we're going to do. You know, and just be prepared for the incoming. Cause you'll get it, but it isn't gonna be workable otherwise.
Right, and so seeing that it hasn't, you know, a lot of folks, I think at one point in time thought, if you put that area, say in HVP, great, someone's gonna jump on that, whether it's waterfall family or private folks, and they're gonna build something, something's gonna happen because that area is
They
there now.
control those properties that those services would otherwise be constructed on.
Exactly, so
So
now,
there's gonna have to be some kind of a taking process. To see to it that it happens whether they like it or not.
and that's what we're looking at, less in the code, but more in the general plan is the carrots and sticks conversation. You know what I mean? There's incentives and then there's other buttons you can push to say it's just, we either have to come in there and do it ourselves. Or make it very attractive for somebody to do.
Well,
to
that's,
achieve that
that's
result.
gonna be, for public services, that's near unto impossible.
Now, we actually had some, so we have the park in HPP, right? That's making some movement. There is the EA that occurred, so
Mhm.
that's a public area. We met with Paradise Park Community Association recently. They're looking at siting a school in that area. Water is a big issue with that. There's
Mhm.
potential to bring a water line down
Mhm.
part way. It's not gonna hit all the sites, so I'm seeing some movement, but it's those actions that I think will really help bring that in. That's happening in HPP. It's maybe a little different story in some of the other communities, you know.
Yeah.
won't
No,
say
I
20
mean-
acres,
Reality is setting in. You know, that in order to have it remain livable, you're gonna have to have these services within the suburb.
Absolutely, no
Yeah.
question. The traffic is pushing that as hard as anything else, right?
Well, and of course, yeah, then we move on to the state and their total failure to provide the infrastructure that they set themselves up for.
100%.
Yeah,
You know, and what the constant conversation around a lot of these issues are infrastructure. You know, I met with the governor's housing task force yesterday, and again, a lot of it was around infrastructure even for affordable housing, right?
Mhm.
And so even to get some critical mass in some of these communities, a lot of it has to do with an infrastructure conversation,
Mhm.
fire flow,
Yeah.
right? So like, what can we do?
What's in it for us?
And the challenge, one of the many myriad of challenges is the infrastructure conversation is now, it's island-wide. It's as severe a component in certain areas as it is improved in certain areas, a little different dynamics. But still a massive need for infrastructure everywhere we're looking at it, which there's the perils of not maintaining and keeping up with infrastructure, you know, every year or two, whatever the frequency is supposed to be, just like our wastewater treatment facility in Hilo. Here we are, and it's like, holy crap, we gotta put money into it now versus.
Pushed it down the line as far as they could until the pipes literally
Correct.
fell off.
Which is a bigger conversation we're having around the CIP process, the maintenance program, to actually have, you know, software to look at this and have a maintenance plan and an integrated system. So the different departments can speak to each other from a software perspective, and it's not just sweep it into the closet strategy. Doesn't really work very well.
All I know is there's all those vacant lots and every one of them has a right to connect.
Yep. They have property rights for sure. And so that's elements that we're very much looking at, and you know, as well as I do, there's no still.
It's your dog now.
Right.
Do other commissioners have questions? I have my little list, but I don't want to dominate, nor
Go
let
ahead.
John dominate.
I'll shut up. He's already heard this 1,000 times.
I figure. Other questions? All right, I'll go to my next question. One of the things I would like to see happen is to require multifamily apartment buildings, condos, to have to provide certain services. A collection place for recyclables and a process to get those recyclables hauled away. A along with an education program. Is that something within your purview of saying if you're gonna build or manage an apartment building, you need to provide these services?
It's actually in the purview, I believe, of both my department as well as DEM. So when it comes to a commercial facility and multifamily, up 4 units would pretty much constitute commercial. We require a waste management plan, and then a loading area and an area for those to keep those, whether it's the roll-off bins or the recycle containers in a screened area that keeps still the pretty from the street. So we do have that now. And then I think it's oftentimes the solid waste management plan will go through DEM for approval. And I think it's trying to integrate some of these concepts within that approval. The pickup is, you know, that on the commercial side, they're usually able to use commercial private haulers. So that gets a bit easier, I think, than the one-off lot, you know, owner. That's much harder. So yeah, I think the mechanisms are there to do that. It's getting more direct on the recycle side of it.
Okay, so the place to look is
robust
what are the
recycling.
components that have to be in this waste management plan? And what are the approval criteria that DEM has?
Yes, I think having that in there and being more clear on what we want to see in that waste management plan would be helpful, with an emphasis on, you know, recycling and recycle collection, et cetera. And you folks know as well as I do, the recycling's been very challenged, and it's not a lot of motivation right now or even appeal on it. So I think we as a county, and this is just my personal opinion, need to step up our game to then be able to push it back to these to the landowners, developers, et cetera, right? When all of that, hey, we are recycling, we are dealing with our waste efficiently and effectively, then I'm just a two-way street mandate kind of guy, you know. I think government and private should both be held accountable.
Okay, the next question on my list is dealing with the issue of construction and demolition waste. So the building code, building permits, that's under your purview?
I have lots to say about it, but I have no control or jurisdiction over it.
That's public work.
Okay, I mean, part of it is just kind of that waste management planning. I'm going to do a renovation of XYZ property, and I'm going to know how and try to minimize waste going to landfill. And here are the
Yeah.
ways I'm going to do it.
So I totally agree with you on that. And I used to run a construction company that specialized in doing building. And that's one of the things that we did was waste management on site, where you recycle everything that you can, you know, use everything that you can, you order your lumber properly, use the scraps for blocking, et cetera. And then other things, you do have people that will use it. There is a use for some of those, what might be a scrap. And you really try to limit all of that, which is actually sound practice for the contractors as well, because there's a cost associated with disposal of that waste. Unfortunately, when it comes to the building code, I don't have any authorities. I have just lots of opinions and comments to give.
Okay, well, thank you for your thoughts and comments. Like I said, I'm just not too familiar where the lines are drawn. Any other comments or questions from other commissioners?
Would the authority come from the council on that, something like that?
For the
In terms of like directing code, what, so just if I'm having it correct, directing code to have ordinance around, or if we had ordinance that would put mandates or instructed code in order to
Yeah, that's a really good
do,
question.
you know, have certain percentage. I know in Oregon, for example, there is a mandated percentage of construction waste, especially if it's deconstruction.
Mhm. That's a good question.
If you don't have the authority, who has the authority?
Yeah, I'm trying to think, it almost feels like a combination between DEM, DPW and potentially planning in there.
Mm.
DPW oftentimes deals, they're going on there looking at, was it built to code, right? We look at it, does the land use fit for what the request is? And then you have your waste policies on what's getting taken to the landfill or diverted from the landfill. So I think anyone on their own, maybe without the support of the other, might be challenged, but I think something where if we come together and and most likely it might be. The strongest is gonna be some type of ordinance saying this is what we need to do on construction sites. And then be able to articulate that clearly and have a pathway for contractors to be able to utilize, to actually efficiently and effectively do it. And I think personally, as having direct experience, when it's done right. There's an efficiency to it. And feel good at the same time, right? So I do think it's gonna probably be most likely, and then this is just me kind of thinking out loud here, it's probably directed more from the waste diversion side from the entity that controls waste. And then integrated, and then it's like, okay, who's inspecting it, who's keeping up on that? They don't have staff, then it's like, is it the building inspector? Do they take a look? Oftentimes things are cleaned up prior to an inspector going out there. So there's one thing to say, here's the practice that we want, and then how do we actually monitor it and have it be implemented effectively? That's where I think it gets harder with the staffing challenges that we've had, and especially when you're looking at. We don't have similar type of development where we see in the mainland. Where you have larger developers, and most of them are bigger tracts, and they can just house everything. And here you can have one area. We have a lot of independent, especially in Puna, it's individual builders, so it needs to be harder, but I think that's where.
Well, even with them, the packages are coming so much better managed. The amount of waste was just dropped like a rock. Just in the last 4 or 5 years, boy, when they pull out, there's nothing. I mean, they picked up the nails.
Are there other comments or questions for Zendo? Otherwise, we might thank you very much. We'll get that information on where to send additional comments and thoughts.
It's in the chat. It's in the chat, Georgine.
It's in the chat. Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't read up. I missed that one. Okay, thank you very much. We've got it in the chat.
Thank you for the opportunity, and happy to come back in the future and talk story. I'm trusting next time won't take 3 times to make it. But again, thank you for all you do. Thank you for your service. I understand what it's like being a commissioner, and it's a lot of work, and thank you all very much. So aloha.
Thank you very much. Okay, Dell has got to leave at 10:45, and did the individual from Reuse Hawaii show up yet? Have you heard from him, Peter?
Not that I know. There's a guest who signed on, but I'm not sure who that is. Ben, are you there? No, Ben.
Okay, then we will move on to new business after bathroom break. If people will come back and try to make it fast, 5 minutes, I appreciate it. And aloha, Adele, if you haven't, oh, she already left.
You stepped out.
Okay. Thank you. All right, we're back in action with a quorum now of 5. Apparently the Reuse Hawaii person did not show up. If he does, we'll try to squeeze him in at the time. So we're on to new business, item 6, which is basically meeting schedule. We have been going alternate months, Tuesday, Wednesday. Part of that was to help you out, John Burns. Is it a help? Should we continue?
Yeah. It's an enormous help. it's just sort of funny because yeah, from August to April. So we switch now and then May through the summer is obviously different, but if we can keep it on Tuesdays to be specific, that is an enormous help for me during the semesters because I do teach Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
So I guess the question on the table is a little frustrating since we're missing two of our commissioners. So I think I might ask you to do a survey monkey if our attorney will allow that for the rest of the year, whether we want to continue or if we can move ourselves to Tuesday. Part of our constraint was that in our charter, it says we meet on the fourth Wednesday. We have some flexibility as needed. And so we've been trying this bouncing Wednesday, Tuesday option. So we just need to know, okay, what's going to work for the rest of the year. The other issue is in June. Well, we will be picking up a new commissioner, we think, in Dot. She's out the last half of June. And more importantly, Peter Sewer, who keeps us all on track, is out on the scheduled day of, no, gripes. Now I've forgotten it. I didn't write it down. What is our June meeting day? Would be the 27th. And he's not here. It happens to be Tuesday. So the question is, and I think since we're missing a couple people still, we'll need to do it offline to check your calendars and see whether or not we could move that meeting up before we lose both Dot and Peter. And maybe move it up to would it have to be the 13th, Peter and Dot?
I think that's when she leaves. Dot, do you want to?
Yes, that's correct. I leave on the 13th.
Oh, sorry, I had that right. I'm wrong. Well, any rate, let's throw in another calendar at us, Peter, to see if there's another way to capture June so that we can have enough quorum. I'm going to be perhaps out of pocket in October, but I could see how I cope with that. So defer it to offline checking of calendars for the new business item. Somebody has a strong feeling. We've heard Tuesdays during school year, but summer's okay, John?
Yeah. I mean, I have more flexibility definitely during the summers, but I mean, it's always tricky because I find that this has come up multiple times. There's never perfect times for everyone, and I recognize if it's in the charter, I'll do my best. I've just wanted everyone to be aware. That's why it is more challenging. I tend to miss several during the academic year because there's just times I can't reschedule courses or exams.
Okay. So we'll try to follow up and see how we can maximize attendance for the rest of the year. Moving on then to item 7, the reports and correspondence, and Ramsey's report. Hopefully you've read it. He had a great director's report, which has gone offline for me. Take it away, Ramsey.
All right, well, thank you, Georgianne. Yeah, we attached, Peter done a great job in attaching the information that you needed as far as legislative updates. Definitely our equipments have been before our county council finance committee, and we had a great results. All of them has been approved, so the process of purchasing is gonna move forward. As far as other legislative matters, you have the list of the bills and resolution that the department in favor of. So if you have any questions, please ask. In addition to that, the budget is also attached. We just went before council a week ago, and we presented our department budgets. So if you have questions as well, if you had a chance to review it. Solid waste division, as far as recycling diversion, Craig, you want to give us update on the reports that we just received?
Yeah, so we recently started the We Can Do It outreach campaign. And that's where we're gonna try and focus on the first two R's, which is reduce and reuse, and then recycle. And then also reinforce the proper recycling procedures. So we were excited to do that along with our regular ads for household hazardous waste and e-waste. And this past Saturday, we attended our first event, the Volcano Earth Day Community Fest. So that was our first event since the COVID shutdown.
So Peter, you have something weird showing on your share screen.
I think that's Craig, I think, I mean,
Is that better?
Yeah.
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 And then, so household hazardous waste collections, all events are completed, and now we're focusing on our August events. E-waste collections has been very popular, and we do now have a permanent site in Kona for the month of, well, the coming months. I don't know if is Jen still on there, Navarro?
I see her.
If she wanted to give an update on the EPA solid waste infrastructure recycling grant.
Jennifer, do you want to say anything about where you are on that? Need to unmute?
Hi, sorry. I wasn't expecting to talk. I was listening. Here, hold on, let me turn my camera on. Not much to report. It has not, no news yet, whether or not it's been awarded. I think that they finished the initial weeding out process of applications of those that didn't just meet the minimum requirements. But the particular project that we're working on is to create a system for reusable foodware in Hilo. And we applied for the grant for dishwashing infrastructure and other components that we would need for that. And so that project is moving along, funding from the EPA or not. And we are doing some community engaged, or starting some community engagement. We have a meeting this week on Thursday. And then we also will be presenting to the commission next month. So you guys will get to give your own feedback and input on that. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Jennifer.
And the last one is that we have the contract signed for our grant writer. So we'll be meeting with him soon and just seeing what ideas we can come up with and look at different grants that we can go for.
This is grants for what?
For recycling. So this is a whole separate, just a recycling section for DEM. So these were the monies that we got from R&D.
Okay. Also in your section, I think, is a life cycle analysis. Were you going to talk about that?
Yeah, so we recently reviewed it, and then we're just gonna wait for seeing if you had any comments on it.
Well, I do. Although I have to say it's something you need to chew on a couple different times. I'd like to throw out just some opinions about life cycle assessments as a general proposition. When you're looking at these tables and the pie charts, recognize that what this is looking at are adverse environmental impacts or lack thereof. It is not looking at the economics of establishing a recycle program or paying for waste to energy or landfill. It's strictly the cost to the environment being monetized. So don't be misled by there's all this money to be had. No, there's zero money to be had. All of it's still going to cost. All of it's still going to rely on the logistics and the transportation costs and the recycling costs and whether or not there's a market out there. This is just saying from an environmental impact standpoint, recycling is a lot better deal, driven mostly by climate change. But interestingly, I thought the landfilling of plastics isn't much of an environmental cost. Landfilling of things that can be composted and turned back into corrugated boxes, for example, is stupid because there's a big savings in terms of avoiding global warming emissions as things degrade in a landfill to a degree. The other thing I caution people about life cycle is it's a comparative study. It is not, those are not absolute dollars to put your confidence in, but it does show relative impacts for the things they happen to cover. There were a couple squirrely assumptions I thought in there, but not that big of a deal. But in general, I was surprised at the extent of recycling on either east or west of the Pacific, assumptions that the values were that large. Apparently, there isn't much involved with transport by ship in terms of environmental impact. But anyway, it was an interesting study. It may inform how we do, if we were to go, for example, in that kind of analysis I did on what should we ban from landfilling. It would say, for example, there isn't a high environmental cost to landfilling plastics. So anyway, it was an interesting study. I need to think about how we may apply it to the future. Any other comments about that? Okay. And then the trailer study. If you had any comments about what that means for DEM?
Yeah, on this one, we received the recommendation from our consultant. And we will be presenting, we requested to present it to council members. During the budget hearing, this came up as one of the accomplishments, and they want us to come back and present the options that were recommended, because eventually it's going to have impact on staffing. So out of the 21 transfer station, there was 9 potential candidates for taking trailers back with a traffic control measures, personnel directing traffic. So we need to navigate through that with different districts and council member to figure out the extent of how many transfer station we should allow back, given the costs associated with that program going back. So stay tuned. You could review both reports and also try to give us recommendation or advice on should we go with the 9 sites or should we go with 4 sites or should we not do anything? So it'll be good to hear back from you and your thoughts. As far as the LCA study as well, comments, feedback, how could we convert that to policies and procedures? Because one thing is to do the report. The second is we need to take advantage of that report rather than just put it somewhere on the shelf and let it dust up. So I just want to make sure that we take advantage of these recommendations and your advices so we could start implementing more policies and procedures that could benefit our constituents here on the island.
Well, I mean, has there been any discussion about relocation of the sites to make them more usable?
When you say relocation of the actual transfer station, physical transfer stations,
Yeah,
that is, it comes at a cost, but I'm not gonna jump the wagon and say anything about it because that's the reason we having that operational analysis to be looked at. If curbside collection end up being, the way to do it, or pay as you throw, or more transfer station, then that's the discussion, that's the time when we need to talk about relocation and funding and trying to figure out, the siting process and what have you. But I mean, this is the whole idea of going with the operational analysis and trying to figure out first, before we start relocating transfer stations and building MRFs or larger facilities, we need to pause, make sure we take in the right direction moving forward so we could start, asking for capital expenditures when it comes to these facilities.
No, I definitely agree with that. I mean, we had in actually the ISWMP, the concept of even shutting down some transfer stations in order to save money. But doing that operational analysis will better inform that decision. Maybe we need.
just on the flip side, I mean, I'm talking about the body count on the highway.
I hear you, John. And those costs should be well stated.
Yeah, we have the growth, but unfortunately, we always been budgeting the status quo. So, and as you all know, capital projects have to go into this wish list, and it has to be prioritized based on countywide priorities. So it's not a standalone fund where you could say, okay, let me manage it and let me relocate facilities. I wish, John, it was that easy. You probably know the process more than I do. You've seen it develop over these decades. And but yeah, I think we need to pause and we need to figure out what is the best direction and how we're going to fund them. And the growth it's happening. I heard some of the comments about subdivision, and I've been saying that, I believe, since I started, allow subdivision in the area to, even for their waste, they could create an association for their wastewater and solid waste. Because now the wastewater probably is a must with package units and or connect to sewers. So somehow an entity need to be built in within these, large subdivision to be able to pick up their waste similar to apartment complex. You better waste enclosure area. It's usually, a 20 by 12 foot enclosed area. And you could allow it for commercial pickup. That way you could reduce the amount of people coming to the transfer station. So you don't have to go through the expense of, building these transfer station or enlarge them or do a relocation. But let's get to the analysis, so we'll have numbers before us. Before we start, any type of recommendation. But it's all out there, and I think once we get it, we'll have better educated recommendation to make.
Yeah, I mean, most of the larger subdivisions do have set-asides, in their planning document that says that they're to make space for X, Y, and Z. Solid waste is one of them. So.
Yeah, the challenge with that is the ownership. Most of these subdivision, they're not under any type of association because they're not an apartment or condominiums, and they're not enclosed residence. So they build the roads, they dedicate roads to county, so become public roads. What type of mechanism you want to have so at least everyone lives within that subdivision, contribute to the cost. And I think that's where we need to navigate, but maybe the creation of home association just for services. But things to continue talking about. It could be just
in theory, as I understand it, is that is in part what you were paying property taxes to the county for. Now, if we're not asking for enough money to get the job done, then we need to be asking for more money to get the job done in terms of the property tax.
Well, I think that's the challenge. You guys heard me talking about it. Solid waste, to me, it's a services. It should not be within the property tax. Because sometimes, just the idea of raising taxes, even $1 or $2, it's not favorable. But if it's a service like every other services, I think you don't have to tie it to raising taxes every time you need to improve services, because it's driven by the people that wanted the service. So if the majority of the people wanted recycling, and you could go to the people and you get 50+1 vote to support whatever additional program you need, then you get the raise you need to provide that service.
Well, but I mean, so we'll call it a fee, but you still have to ask for it.
Yes, and you have to ask for it and you have to explain it. And if the majority of the people want the service, then it's not an issue, right? Either they vote it in or vote it out, and that's how you can manage whatever services people would like to have, but the majority of the people will speak out on what they like to do versus going out and saying, raising taxes, because taxes covers police, fire department, roads, et cetera, et cetera. So it'll be a harder message to get across because the recycling is going to get lost. And even if you go and increase the property tax to provide more recycling, that money is not going to go into that basket of recycling. It's going to go into the taxes and it's going to divvy up to other services. And technically, you may not get it to deliver on the service that you guys want. So, yeah, it's
I'm gonna call timeout here. I think that that's an interesting topic for us to cover maybe at the next meeting, to talk about how do we recommend looking at more of a service model rather than property tax as a way to fund it. I mean, we've talked before, and certainly in the wastewater arena, of treating the service as an enterprise fund, and you lay out, these are the costs to provide this service, and here's how we're paying for it through these service fees. There may be a way to deal with it in terms of helping associations. I create an association and helping sell the concept of providing a service and paying for it. I happen to have done it with my homeowners association, but I had to get on the board to go do it. But there are ways to do it, and I think that might be something worth ginning up for agenda for another time. I just want to go back and say, Lee, did you have any comments on the trailer study you wanted to get in?
Yeah, I quickly glanced through it and I noticed that at the beginning of the document, it said that prior to 2022, trailers were not allowed. That's inaccurate. I moved here in 2005 and we used trailers, I think, up to I guess it was when they were banned in 2022. So maybe they didn't word the paragraph correctly for background. And I also noticed through some of the diagrams that they did some pretty weird, outlandish backing and turnings with the trailers that, at least I know for what he knew, you just drive around the bin and you do a circle. You don't have to do no backing up or anything. So, and the also, it looked like, I'm not sure, but it looked like they're using a 12-foot long trailer, but you only wanted to limit trailers to, I think it was 6 by 9. So they're using a larger trailer than what you're going to allow. That's going to skew trailers that you allow in when making that decision. And then I go back to, then we should be able to use the 12-foot trailer that they're using, or 10-foot at least, 5 by 10. And the, let's see, there's one other thing. Trailers. Oh, the other thing was, why does the county think that we can't back up trailers? I mean, we bought it, we learned how to drive it, we can back up and we can drive for it. Looking at the designs, I don't know how anyone is going to be able to throw off trash without backing up any type of vehicle, trailer or not. And the we don't need flaggers telling us how to back up, or we're smart enough. When we had trailers going through Wahinu, we knew, okay, trailer coming in, you sit there, you wait till it's clear, then you drive in. Sometimes you have to wait for someone who tries to sneak in behind you. You wait till it's clear, you back up, you do your business and you leave. And yeah, it might take 20-30 minutes, but we understand we're not paying for it. So you just be courteous and wait. And I haven't heard anyone dying from being hit by a trailer, or I hadn't I may be wrong, but I hadn't heard of any accidents from trailers being used. Of course, all my experience is from what he knew. I know there are some transfer stations that are pretty tight. I don't even know how you get a car in there. So most of my comments have to deal with what he knew, and I think a county's going overboard with this whole trailer thing. We did it for who knows how many years. I mean, we can police ourselves, the attendant that's there all the time anyways. I mean, if he needs to step in, he can. I've had them do that before. So I don't think the county needs to hire individual traffic planners for each site where they allow trailers. And the other thing to consider is that because the county is limited to like 3 days a week, before, we could go all week long. And that spaced it out. So you didn't have, I mean, just regular traffic now, sometimes you wait 20 minutes and there's no trailers. So of course, when you allow trailers in, you only have 3 days. It's gonna be crazy. So that's another thing, that the transfer stations where you allow trailers, you're gonna have to either expand or do something, because I shudder to think what that's gonna be like. So those are my comments for at least right now.
Ramsey, is there somebody that Lee could talk to about more detail on the plan, the report itself?
Yeah, he could talk to Gene, but let me cover some of his concerns.
Okay.
Lee, the reason, as you've seen in the report, no reversing, it's not the idea is nobody knows how to reverse. The idea will take the 30 minutes you talked about. When somebody in the morning have to swing by to get rid of one garbage bag, and he had to be at work by 8 o'clock, he cannot afford waiting 30 minutes for somebody to take their time. And so you create friction, and we've seen it. Our operators, the Swiffers, seen it. I've seen it personally in Waimea. I was there just for that purpose one time, to just get an observation. This guy comes in with a trailer and the guy behind him driving a Tesla. And they almost got in a fist fight. So it does happen. Why he know? Fortunately, with the new design, you guys not gonna have an issue. None of the restriction applies for Waihino after we open the new facility. But the other facilities, as far as safety and having somebody there to make sure that people don't get upset and start fist fighting and, going around taking the 30 minutes, not be considerate to the people behind them. So all that was considered. So we just need to make sure we manage our facilities, and allowing everybody, the time to come in and go out without any potential of conflicts. One of the option could be, that would be up to council member if they wanted just to designate one day for trailers, and they could do whatever they wanted to do. They could hatch it out between themselves if they want to take 30 minutes or an hour. But yeah, we have to be considerate of everybody involved, everybody that comes to the transfer station for service.
As I recall, the purpose of the study was to respond to some council person's concern that you look at how can you make more places amenable to trailers. And that was the purpose of this study. If there are some questions about the assumptions that were made in setting up the study review, that's where I would wonder, maybe Lee needs to talk offline with Jean and understand where they came from. But I think the council is going to be the one that decides where the trailer issue goes. And
the whole issue was safety. Remember, the whole
Yeah.
reason we banned them because of safety. So safety was number one for these consultant to look at. That's why they looked at maneuvering. They looked at accessibility and how to maintain that safety within that facility, and yet be able to come in, go out, and stay within that window. So, but anyway, so hopefully, Lee, that kind of answer your questions. But as far as the size of the trailer is, because each trailer is limited to 3 cubic yard, but the dimension of the trailer from where you tie it into your truck to the end, it could vary, but the actual dimension where you put the waste is limited to the 6 and 9, because that gives you the 3 cubic yard. So the idea is, because we don't have scales at the transfer station, so the idea, the actual dimension where you limit it to 3 cubic yard is dictated by that dimension that was given. That way we can ensure we only get in 3 cubic yard coming to our transfer stations.
are there any comments or questions from other commissioners?
I'm a little late to the game on the trailer conversation. So was there actually safety issues that triggered the study? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, we have 2 safety committees that went and looked at the site, and they recommended way back then to ban the trailers. So we have our county-owned safety committee, which is not the department, the entire county safety committee. That's where the recommendation came from. So.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 7.3.5 is the administrative rule proposals that we saw last time, and there were a couple public hearings on. Were there any comments you guys wanted to make about that? Ramsey, Greg, whoever's left.
No, we signed it. It's supposed to be effective within 10 days. No, I mean, both meetings went well, so we look forward to, these admin rules, as you know, it's subject to change. We could every year or every time something comes up. Hopefully, that's what I was talking about earlier. If we do that operational analysis or any type of studies that may trigger admin rules, policies, and procedures, modification, and that's where we need to be able to apply that. So I look forward to working with you on that operation analysis and others that could trigger policy and procedure changes as we move forward.
Well,
As far as the wastewater, go ahead. Is Chris Laudy in or left for the wastewater?
He left. I would like to jump out of order, actually, which is to go to a question that I asked down at 7.5. Number 1, I attended the Hilo meeting, and there was a bit of agitation that occurred by haulers who use the Hilo sort station. And I was concerned about, one, it didn't appear they understood what the current requirements were. And we're concerned about the new requirements and new billing that would occur to them. And
Yeah,
it-
Georgianne, that one, I got a call on that one actually over the weekend from the mayor and Linda from Leo Refuge from Hilo. So I talked to Linda, they were confused. Unfortunately, I was not able to be at the meeting, but I was on the Kona side meeting, but yes, I got the same message, but their concern was they thought the 5 cubic yard per day rather than per load. So I redirected her to the language and for some reason they went under the impression that effective today, they're gonna be limited to 5 cubic yard per day. And that's got their attention really. So, and she was
what I
representing,
saw at the meeting was that there was lack of understanding about the current requirements and that changes had been made previously, I don't know exactly when, in the administrative rules, and they were not adequately informed. So it kind of goes back to that general issue that we had raised before about the importance of having a public information officer, or whatever you want to call him, communications person that can let people know, hey, rules are changing. Now the rules have changed. Here's what they are. Be aware of them. And we've got consistent enforcement. There was also a question of who is being told what at the sort station by staff. But the issue of communicating changes in the admin rules. There are going to be new rules issued. They include fee increases and some other minor changes. How are they being communicated? How are you tackling the issue of letting stakeholders who are affected by this know they've got something new other than having to have read something that got posted on the website?
So Georgine, if I can, this is Sherry, and Ramsey, if it's okay with you, I'll just answer this question.
no, go ahead. I was gonna ask you to answer it anyway,
Okay.
because it's legal, announcement. Go ahead. Sure.
So with regards to the question that came up about the alleged, admin rule changes, there were no admin rule changes. There was a fire that occurred at the Hilo sort station that required an emergency rule to be put in place, limiting the amount of waste that we could take per day, because Department of Health requires the floor to be clean every single day. And so that was the reason for that temporary immediate change to the amount of waste that we would accept from commercial haulers. So what Brenda had agreed to do, and with my consent, is that when these rules take effect for our commercial haulers, they're going to receive a copy of that so that they can't say they didn't know.
Good, good. Again, I think it's just a general issue of we've got to make sure that stakeholders are informed.
And this might be just an, just my commentary, but sometimes people want to use that stance because they want to get what they want. And unfortunately for those individuals who were hollering that they knew better than what the posted rules were, is that the supervisor was present at that meeting, and thereafter the rules were enforced the way they were supposed to be. So but that was the agreement that we came to, is that we're going to provide them with a copy of the amended rules, because these are actually the rules that are now going to be in place that affect them going forward with regards to the fees at the facility.
And in addition to that, Sherry, I think the good thing, they showed up, so they must have looked at the website. So they were informed, Georgianne, otherwise they won't show up, right? So they did get the message. That's how I understood it. But I think part of it is Sherry's right, because what the admin rule did is just extended that rule till June 23, which is June 30th of 2023. of that limit loading. So, but like I said, it goes back to, they were panicking because they thought, oh my God, it's 5 cubic yard per day. And that's the new rule. So it's really not a new rule. It just extended the current rule that took place in 2020. So it was only clarification and communication. But the good thing is, like I said, they did show up. So they were cognizant of the rulemaking and changes. And they were able to access it, be able to be present at the Hilo meeting.
Okay. Back to wastewater. Lots of information in the package. Does anybody have any questions, or is there a particular point you wanted to make, Ramsey?
No, I think Chris Loud is our temporary appointed division chief. So I was gonna have him give an update, but I guess he did sign off. Bahala Nalehu moving forward with the timeline of AOCs with Hawaii wastewater projects, similar projects as we talked about, headwork, odor control, the sand filters, North Kona pump stations. So the projects during the budget, as you guys seen from the attached document, we had pointed out the 6 months, 12 months, and beyond the 12 months. So I recommend that that become our objectives moving forward, and we're gonna pay attention to these objectives so we could be able to deliver and be able to measure such objectives. So that the concept here, something is going to be measurable as we move forward based on the master schedule that we have created and the milestones that we have accomplished. That way we could deliver on these projects within these windows that we presented.
Yeah.
And that's as far as the wastewater. I believe review these objectives, and if you have questions, please let's talk about it. If you need clarification, to what level of involvement you want it to be based on these objectives and projects, based on these projects that outlined within these objectives, the 6 months, the 12 months, and the beyond. So, take the time, look at it, and maybe next time we could figure out, the level of involvement and in a reaction on these projects. Information request for DM from commissioners. So is that Georgianne?
Yeah, that's me. And Peter, you can correct in the minutes. I should have referred to item 5.2 on the communication of rules. But on 5.1, you had last time, and I don't think we have time to go into it this one, so I'll put it on the agenda next time as well. You had mentioned this concept of designated the whole county as a single sewer district, and somehow managing both private services and county services as a whole instead of all these little piecemeal sections as part of the integrated wastewater management planning. And I just wanted to hear more about what does that mean and how does it get accomplished and what's in the way of happening. It sounds like a very intriguing idea that you've got some ideas for, but I think we need to see it in a little bit more detail and understand, well, why can't you do that? And is there something we can do about those barriers? So are people anxious to talk about that now? Are you, Ramsey? You didn't write anything up. Can we put it on next time's agenda?
You
I
could,
prefer it go next time. Ramsey has a work request into Corporation Council and we're currently working on doing the research because we need to essentially have ordinances and potential state law amendments that would provide that opportunity for us. So we are still working on that.
Okay, great. I will postpone until you're ready.
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Sherry.
Georgina, I have a question.
Yes.
This is for Ramsey, phase 2 of wastewater treatment rehabilitation. Is that still have components of resource recovery? And if so, what are you currently looking at?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question. Phase 2 is on track. We had listed it under our 12 months objectives to make sure that we get it out to bid. Currently, we just turned in our application. We've been working with R&D and we got $228,000. That's going to be grant EDA funding to look at capturing the hydrogen out of the effluent from Hilo treatment plant, and also look at capturing the gas out of the anaerobic digesters that we're going to be constructing. So green energy capturing technologies, definitely hydrogen extraction out of water, clean water. But my understanding now, technology could take dirty water, such as, I don't want to call it dirty, actually, our effluent. After it gets treated, it's pretty clean. So the idea is, could we extract hydrogen out of that 2.8 million gallon per day? So we're going to be doing that study. Once we get the green light, we turn in the application today to R&D, so it's going to be submitted. My understanding that 228,000, it's will be given to our department to do such that. And if we identify the technology and be able to extract hydrogen out of that 2.8 MGD, that'll be great to do. And then we need to figure out how we're going to fund it. There's a lot of money under the climate change bills, so we're going to try to tap into that, take the lead statewide of trying to capture hydrogen out of wastewater. Something we've been talking about for a while, but now we got the money to be able to get the science behind it and see how it all put together. As far as the gas out of these digesters, currently the way we design in it, some of the gas will be captured to heat up the boiler. Our sludge need to be maintained at a certain temperature. So as the flow comes in from our secondary treatment units, get heated up with the gas that get generated from these digesters. So we put in it to use. The remaining gas will be flared using the highest technology to flare it with definitely the carbon emission in mind. It's a tier 4, I believe, unit. So, but with the idea of that study may come back and say, okay, you got enough gas from these digesters to convert it to, transportation energy, rather than burning it. So that we don't have that much because we are constrained of the amount of flow that comes currently to the facility. Because our facility technically is designed for 6 million gallon per day. We could take up to 13 million gallon per day, but we currently at less than half. So eventually we definitely need to start increasing our customer base, allow for more people to connect to the sewer, encourage people to connect to sewer. So we could generate more biosolids, more sludge that we could benefit from and capture.
So are we still, you're still studying that piece then, the gas capture potential and what that looks like, that's still being looked at, and then also what about sludge? And I guess we're not looking at using the R2 water for something else if there is water, if it's going towards hydrogen, this is something new to me.
Well, we are working with R&D and certain farms to figure out the challenges. You need to have the land. DLNR own most of the land there. Could we cultivate the land around the facility and become our disposal area? You know, there's a lot of challenges just to switch the, you know, to kind of switch the flow from going where it is to more of land irrigation. You still have to go through a totally different environmental process and try to secure the land, trying to figure out what could you grow there, understanding the water balance between rainwater and the water you generate. How could you offset the differences? Because we do have about 265 rainy days in Hilo. So the idea, how are you going to balance that with the amount of water you're producing, but how many acres you need to be able to, for the plan to uptake that flow. So it's complicated because you have to go through these complicated design equations just to make sure that you capture in the nutrients, but you're not allowing the wastewater to percolate into the groundwater. So, and you need to have enough land and the right crops to be able to extract these nutrients at a faster pace. So, and these are the challenges. You know, most of that area we looked at, it's all rocks, as you know. So it's not even terrain. So it's unfortunate we're not somewhere in the mainland where you could say, you know, direct the R2 water to irrigation. We may need to import some type of soil, but we are working on exploring every other possibility in that side.
So as far as the R2 as well, looking at, are you folks looking at, sounds like it's still in analysis and conversation, and it's not necessarily determined at this point. But are you folks looking at light industry as opposed to agriculture, being that Hilo doesn't necessarily have the same needs as Kona, for example, in terms of irrigation with the R2? But
well,
more
that's
like,
why I mentioned either the hydrogen and gases or R2 for ag.
got it.
So, yeah, we're looking at the industry versus the farming.
I was also thinking about the sewage sludge. Do we make enough to recover the sewage sludge into ground cover for, I mean, fertilizer, et cetera?
If the ag end up being the way to do it, and grow some type of grass, that will be for land application. The sludge will be used.
No,
for
I was thinking more, you know, dry it, bag it, and sell it.
Well, it has to go through the federal code of regulation, the 503B. Unfortunately, nobody compost biosludge, biosolids, because you have to go through certain certification with Department of Health and be able to. Senegro is the only one that does it in the state, I believe. They do it in city and county. And believe it or not, they create these beautiful material that would be great for ag, but they use it for edge power because it's high in BTU as well. But they have challenges, so they end up taking it to the landfill. So after they spend that much time and energy to produce it, but there's challenges with it. If you get somebody that could compost the biosolid, mix it with mulch and create a soil amendment, I'll be good. The challenge here is dealing with the human factor because it is a human waste. The likelihood of people taking it for compost and bagging it and say, okay, here's 10-pound bags and you guys start using it. It just, we need to do more of perception and rebranding of products. I think that's where the challenge may be, Georgianne. It's just trying to get that human factor satisfied with the rebrand.
Oh, that's okay. I need to move us along. I promised John he could go eat lunch at some point. Hopefully he hasn't disappeared or we've lost quorum. Is he still on?
You left about a minute ago.
Oh, I was looking down at my paper.
That
All
conversation.
right, we've now lost quorum and I'm going to call the meeting. But before I do that, again, anybody who wants something covered on the agenda next, let me know. I've got a couple of items that I said we'd cover for next time. We can try again for Reuse Hawaii. Our next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, May 24th. It'll be in Kona if you want to go in person. And otherwise, Sherry, we don't have a quorum. We can't hold a vote. I just tell Peter to quit recording.
Sure.
I just had one question.
I think you can get a motion to adjourn.
I just have one question.
John, you had a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, somebody was trying to tell me that they were having some problem with the wastewater system over here in Hilo. And I couldn't make any heads or tails of it. You just.
I didn't hear the question. Wastewater, what issue with the wastewater?
Well, someone was going on to me the other day that they were having some problem meeting the criteria for safe release of the wastewater on the Hilo side here. And I said, I didn't know anything about it, but we were gonna have a meeting and I'd ask the question, is there any problem with the wastewater system over on the Hilo side?
I have not heard. I don't know. I mean, if you get us more detail of the concern.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was the whole conversation was short on detail, but.
Yeah,
But
that's where
there
the
was some
devil
back
is.
and
The devil in
forth.
the details. So.
The devil lives in the details, yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, well, you can find out and contact, I know Chris or Ramsey, and maybe they can figure it out. There was some back and forth with Dell about some hump broke or something, I don't know. Anyway, motion to adjourn. Anybody?
Second.
Second.
Can we adjourn and
And
not?
Todd, you're waving your hand. Were you just saying bye?
Can we
She was saying
adjourn
bye.
a non-functioning meeting?
Bye, everyone. Thank you.